Welcome to the Wandering Tangent Podcast. I'm BJ. With me is Jeff and Gary, and today we're talking about the 1979 sci-fi horror Alien.
Excuse me, BJ. I am a guest star on this program.
You are no longer a guest star.
Hey,
you've been here for like 5 episodes straight. At what point do you lose guest star status?
when I get kicked off the podcast so that somebody else can be on.
Exactly. So next time you go away and come back, I will start calling you a guest star again.
Yeah, he'll have to be kicked off for a while. So what were you saying, BJ, about space truckers? Is that like an alternative to the Aliens movie?
No, I think there might actually be. So since Jeff is bringing this up, what's the term? In media res, without context. For some reason, before we started recording, I had slipped into a weird accent, and so I made a joke about I was speaking a southern accent because of space truckers, because technically the crew in Alien is space truckers, and
yeah,
I could be wrong. I think there might be an actual movie called Space Truckers of somewhat dubious quality.
And for the audience's sake, yes, that is the movie we're talking about today. Not Space Truckers, but Alien.
Alien, one of 2 movies in the Alien franchise. Well,
yes, only 2.
What?
Well, maybe 2 and a half if you count Alien vs. Predator.
No, BJ.
That's more of a spin-off.
There's only 2. What? Yes, that is a spin-off.
Okay.
Okay, right. So there's only 2, meaning Aliens 3 is some other strange thing that happened probably in another universe, right?
Okay.
And then also Aliens Redemption, that's another thing.
Well,
Jeff?
for
whatever that is,
well, for
right?
one thing, that's not even the name of the movie, so...
So it was something with an R.
I want to explain it to
Aliens, you. Red, blah, blah, blah. What?
I want to explain it to you. So the first
Alien
movie is under the genre of horror. The second Alien movie is under the genre of action. And any other movies in the Alien series are under the genre of cheap cash grab.
They're under the genre of, we don't talk about Alien 3 or Alien Resurrection.
Okay, so
especially Alien Resurrection. Holy crap.
Yes.
All right, so should we get down to business here? You guys probably love Aliens, or Alien, and Aliens, the sequel. I'm sure both of you love both of those movies.
No,
but you don't like Aliens 3.
2?
I actually...
Wait.
Go ahead.
No, we might as well say this now before Jeff says, I think Alien Resurrection is the best movie ever. No, I don't think even Jeff would stoop to that level. Oh, now I feel bad because all day long I was like, I'm going to be so nice to Jeff this episode. And
I know. You lasted about a minute and a half.
Here we are. 2 minutes in recording. I'm already dunking on Jeff. I am not sorry. Anyway, so to be fair,
some things never change.
I do not believe I have seen Alien 3 end to end. I watched part of it on TV once and was not very impressed. And then for some reason in the middle of the night, Alien Resurrection was on TV. So I sat down and watched it, and I don't remember much about it, and I wish I remembered less.
Okay.
So anyway, Jeff, you were going to cast more dispersions upon your taste of movies?
Yes, of course. And I will do that. So, yes, I actually do like Aliens 3, but I will admit that Aliens 1 and 2 are more entertaining. They certainly are. Aliens 3 is much more almost like apocalyptic, and it's a sad ending, and anyway, I don't want to spoil it too bad, but I actually think it was good, but it certainly wasn't entertaining like the first 2. So the fact that you guys think that it's not even worth even talking about or even pretending that it exists like we do with Star Wars, where we pretend like some of them don't exist. Yeah, I get that, but I actually think all 3 of them go well together. But Alien, the other one, whatever it's called, is it Resurrection?
Alien Resurrection.
That one is not as good either. That one's more like just a video game sort of thing.
Like I said,
where
Jeff,
the characters are just wacky, like they belong in a video game.
like I said, Jeff,
It's got some good things about it. Yeah, it's a cash grab. But there are a few components to that movie that are kind of interesting. I think Ripley in the Aliens Resurrection, what they did with their character is kind of fun in a way. But yeah, certainly 1 and 2 are definitely the best of this whole thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, we found him. We found the one person with something nice to say about Alien Resurrection. I was not I was not expecting that. I will be honest.
I haven't really heard of other people's opinions, so it's hard for me to walk with the other members of the flock and follow their opinions. But I admit it's not as good.
Yeah, no. From my understanding, most people are pretty cold on Alien 3, and most people are very hot in their hatred of Alien Resurrection.
Really? I could understand that.
But anyway, we're not here.
3. Yeah.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about the two movies on that. Well, I guess we can't.
That we're not here to talk about.
I guess we can't even acknowledge they don't exist anymore since we just spent like 5 minutes talking about them. But we're not here to talk about the two not so good movies in the Alien quadrilogy, or even the other good movie in the Alien quadrilogy. We're here to talk about the first one, Alien. No S,
right.
no number, just Alien.
So, BJ, what did you think of it?
So, this was actually my first time watching Alien.
What? Your very first time?
Yeah.
You've seen pieces of it, though, right?
I think I had seen the ending on TV once. And it's a old enough movie and a famous enough movie that I basically knew the vast majority of what happened in the movie. But this is my first time sitting watching it from end to end, and I quite liked it. That was pretty good.
So you recommend it?
Yes. Though
it's a great which holiday are we on?
Halloween.
Yeah, Halloween. It's a great Halloween movie.
I think he even said, well, I don't know, can't remember if it was you or Gary that said it was Halloween. We're doing spooky episodes. But yeah, should note that I think this is our first rated R movie we've talked about. And this movie is very R.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There's a scene.
No, Jaws was R.
No, I thought Jaws was PG-13.
Yeah. It's R.
Oh no, PG.
Jaws was PG.
It was PG.
PG. We had this discussion ad nauseum while we were talking about Jaws.
Okay, well,
please listen to our Jaws episode.
Really, Jaws should be R.
No,
really, but anyway,
Jaws is solid PG-13 in modern standards. But as we said at the time, it was prior to PG-13 being a rating. Back when parental guidance being suggested was actually, please guide your kids while watching this movie. Yes. Parental guidance is definitely suggested. In the case of Alien, it is restricted. Gary, what do you think about the movie?
So this movie, I have actually seen this movie before. So to put it on my chart of recommendation of I have on multiple occasions gone out of my way to watch this movie. But in searching in preparation for this particular podcast, I did not actually own a copy of this movie. So I think that's somewhere that speaks to something about how much I appreciate this movie, in that I've wanted to watch it on multiple occasions, but I've never actually wanted to watch it enough to own my own copy. So, or at least keep a hold of a copy. Because sometimes, you own a copy of a movie or something like that, and then it just kind of gets lost, and you like, oh, dang, it's lost. And you don't go bother to buy a new one or something like that. So I don't know if I've ever owned a copy, but yeah.
Or you buy 2 copies of a movie.
Yeah,
I've done that. I'm like, oh, I love that movie. And then I come home, it's like, oh, it's on my shelf.
Or you buy one copy of it and you really, really keep good track of where it is because you really like that movie, or something along those lines. But it's not to the point where I own a copy or have consistently owned a copy of this movie. So, but I have, like I said, watched it on multiple occasions because it's a good movie.
Okay, so you recommend it?
I recommend it. It's more than just if it's on TV, watch it kind of recommendation. I say, give give it a good shot and if you really like it, then go buy yourself a copy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I liked it too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think you kind of said, Jeff, but
yeah, I kind of did.
What's your opinion?
It's weird. Like, you have Star Wars that came out in 1977, great sci-fi that was groundbreaking and all that, and then this one came out 2 years later, 1979, which is the same time as Star Trek: The Motion Picture, roundabout. So this one is like, I love the gritty sci-fi. And this movie did better than Star Wars and Star Trek at least that category of a really gritty, dark, but also very technical sci-fi where the characters are very believable. They're very natural acting, which kind of reminds me almost of The Thing from Another World, where the dialogue was very smooth and the people seemed like just more like real natural people who are just doing something that they've done many times before, and they're used to it, and they're professionals, but they're also just raw humans. So, with like, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So
no, you're good.
So to be fair, I don't think either Star Wars or Star Trek were going for more of a gritty feel. Star Wars is more of a space fantasy, and Star Trek is Star Trek. Even though they do have their kind of weird, why is this in here moments, like the transporter accident or whatever, right? Which is
Star Trek is just more clean. It's monstery and scary, but it's a very clean sci-fi where the people are living in a utopian society where everything's clean and organized. This is more gritty. Like, human greed is still very much a thing. Companies are greedy, and then you have these people who are just ordinary people going out doing work in outer space, and it's great. I just love the feel of it. I love the technical things that they put into this movie to make it feel like this was a real space mission. And in 1979, I mean, this is how they kind of saw the future from a Hollywood viewpoint, of course, but just very machine oriented and traveling in far space. Go ahead, Gary.
So there is something, and I'm gonna note that there's a huge fan following around this movie or this series of movies, and also there's a huge fan following around. There's a concept that's introduced in this movie. I don't have to go into spoilers to talk about it because eventually we will, but when we talk about this movie from a technical standpoint, or at least from like a science fiction standpoint, it gets into these interesting concepts because it shows technology in this universe, right? That has gotten to a point where there's like artificial intelligence, and there's all this theorized, like there's interstellar travel, there's cryosleep. All of these are common things, and yet when you look at the computer screens, it's CRTs, and the interaction between human and computer is printing on a screen, and human has to type. There's not even an audio interface, right? And yet also at the same time, there are machines that look like people. I'm not going to say who until we get into the spoilers, but there are machines that look like people. So, and they are artificial constructs, right? Artificially intelligent constructs. And this is kind of a weird interaction of technology that looks hyper advanced and yet also at the same time looks completely like outdated.
It came out of the 80s,
right? So there's there's actually a term for this, right? And it's got a huge following, which it's called cassette futurism. It's kind of like steampunk, but instead it's called cassette futurism, where they interpret it as a style choice, that this particular science fiction has a style choice, right? They've gotten to so far advanced that they can just stylistically downgrade their interactive capabilities because they want to, because it's the fashion to do so. They don't have to, but they decide to. least that's the only interpretation that people could come up with at the time.
Well, there's another interpretation, and that is just that machines are doing so much work behind the scenes that they don't have to look at very much.
Yeah.
And that there's only like a small amount of data that really the human needs to make decisions with.
Yeah.
And that so their screens are quite simplistic.
Oh, also, also to be fair, in like the late 70s, early 80s, from our point of view, Mother is basically a search engine, right?
Right.
And we were alive during the 80s, but very, very young. But like the concept of typing a question into a computer and having it spit out an answer almost instantaneously was probably kind of mind-blowing back then, because,
Yeah.
that was back in the good old days of like, Commodore 64 or whatever. That was the earliest computer I remember.
Yeah, and they didn't have a question-answer concept even programmed into a computer. This,
it's like, I would assume since we probably know most people who listen to our podcast, so most people probably remember like DOS and command prompt.
Yes.
So like even back then, like typing in a naturally formed sentence into a computer and getting an answer was, high tech, far flung, right? You didn't have to type, CD / .exe or whatever, right?
You'd have to type in a series of commands, and then you would only get in a pre-programmed response. Yes,
exactly. Yeah. So
these are so it is super high tech, and yet the interface is something that we can see as being preposterously outdated, and yet. So it's hyper advanced on the one side, and yet it's so far back on the other side that people have to scratch their head. But then the idea is, how about this is a style choice, right? So what if they have the super high technologies? It's like, for instance, if you had a fusion engine in a Model T car, right? This is super high advanced technological, fusion powering an electric motor in a Model T chassis, right? A person has done this because they chose to do so, right? They wanted a Model T chassis, and yet they had access to a small fusion engine and a hyper advanced electric motor, right?
Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead, BJ. Go ahead.
Okay, fine. I'll go ahead.
You're up. Go ahead.
So I get what you're saying, but it's also kind of present centric to be like, well, why in the 70s when they made this futuristic sci-fi movie, why didn't they, envision the same far-flung high-tech stuff that we're thinking of, 30 years past them, right?
Well,
so
even
it's like
in terms of the movie,
it's like I get what they're saying, but on the other hand, it's like,
but
I don't know if that's.
But like
I don't know if that was like what they were going for when they made the movie.
Well, there's two ways to look at it. There's the one way is you look at it of this is a movie. It was made in 1979, and they did a really good job of imagining what technology would be like. That's one way. The other way is we're trying to make this world be as realistic to our point of view today as possible. I think that's where Gary's coming from. He's trying to say, well, to make this as real as possible, then they would have made aesthetic choices just because it's what makes humans more comfortable, or because humans like these kinds of interfaces, and so they just made them as a design decision, or
it could also
or something
be
like that.
Robustness, because when we start going into it, we're going to talk about what kind of thing that what kind of situation they're in, and robust tech, having that keyboard that they show in there, the keyboard that Mother is interfaced with, probably will last till the end of time. If they still have that prop, it's probably still working.
You're right. I mean, this spaceship has to live in space for a very long time. I mean, let's get into spoilers now.
Yeah,
okay.
We can't go further.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we've danced around the topic of, oh, well, I can't say this because of spoilers. I think I think once we do that 2 or 3 times, it's time to go to spoilers.
I think also the fact that it's very difficult to spoil a, 40-year-old movie now? 40-plus-year-old movie?
It's possible. There's
42.
people out there that haven't seen old movies.
That is true.
So we still have to do our due diligence.
Well, on the other hand, at a certain point, if you're listening to a podcast about a old movie and don't expect to get spoiled while you're watching a podcast on that movie.
I don't know.
But
I don't know. It's
official warning of spoilers in place. We're going to start talking about details. Yeah. Details, people.
Details. Yes. And so, yes, if one of these spaceships goes off course, it could be flying through space for decades, which happens in the storyline, not in this movie, but in other alien movies where a ship flies through space for 40 years, 50 years or so. So, yeah, the technology has to be robust enough that it can stay working for a very long time. Anyway.
So we're talking about this ship. What kind of ship is it, Jeff? Or no, BJ, whichever one of you wants to answer that. What is this ship and what is it doing?
So the Nostromo is a tow, so it's towing like what they say, like 2 million pounds of ore or some sort from some place in space back to Earth for processing.
Now do they say that in the movie what they're towing?
I think
it's mining something.
I don't know if they say like specifically what it is, but it says that they're towing something. They might say ore, or I might just read it somewhere.
I read a book based on the movie a long, long time ago. And so I don't know how accurate that is to the movie itself. I don't remember them saying, I know they're towing something and it's some sort of basic resource, but in the book, it has a very specific answer. Do you want me to say what that answer is?
Sure.
Sure.
It's
sure.
So
no, don't say it.
What it is they went to a world and they extracted oil, and it was large reservoirs of crude oil, and then on the return trip as they're going, there's a large automated process. Basically, they're towing a large oil tanker that's also a refinery. And so by the time they get back to Earth, all of the crude oil will be processed into whatever crude oil extracts they need it to be, like whatever refined oils are necessary, gas, other petroleum products that are necessary from an oil refinery. So it's kind of a relatively well thought out process. You'll go in there, you'll have months, if not years of processing time. You go out, you pick up the raw material, and then you'll have months, if not years of processing time to get back, and you'll just dump off the processed materials on Earth and then go back out with a new crew, new tug, and repeat.
Well, on the subject of the ship,
we don't know I don't remember they actually say in the movie though.
No,
this is all like extended universe stuff. Right?
Yeah, so this is like the novelization based on the movie, did you say?
Yeah,
I kind of zoned out for a hot second.
Movie, so.
Okay, so I did have a couple of things about the spaceship that kind of had me scratching my head. Like, for one thing, why is there just this big room with chains hanging down that it's raining in? What is the purpose of this room?
Why is every room on the spaceship so spooky?
Okay,
maybe
I can answer the rain. And I can answer the chains, because if you go into
Tim
that
Burton,
room,
design the inner hall is what it is.
If you go into that room,
we need a creepier over here.
Jeff. Okay, if you go into that room,
I'm listening. There's
large vehicles, right, BJ?
Yes.
And then that's kind of like one of their, for lack of a better term, it's like a staging point for these large vehicles, presumably. That must be involved in the material extraction process, those vehicles, right? I'm guessing the chains are part of a winch system, because the ship will probably land and lower one of those vehicles down. So the winch, so that's what they would use the winch system for. The fact that it's a very large room allows for, because they talk about in the movie as they're taking off, so they land on a planet in the movie, right? And then the landing isn't the best landing ever. And then by the time they're getting ready to take off, they haven't performed near enough of the maintenance that is necessary to do a good takeoff, right? So a lot of the systems are damaged as they're taking off. And one of those systems is I think they even mention it. It's like a humidity regulation system. And you'll notice in the lower decks, there's all this steam going everywhere. Well, where does that steam go? It goes into large spaces and then condenses. And in that particular area, it's been condensing and falling down as it looks like rain, but really it's just kind of just dripping water everywhere.
Okay, sure, I can buy that. So, thing number 2 that pulled me out. Why is there so many strobe lights on this ship? I mean, I will admit,
they just didn't put them down after their last dance party.
It's like
why didn't anyone take the strobe lights?
It's like
down?
I will admit, maybe there's industrial use for strobe lights. My only experience with them was the couple of years I worked in a spook alley, and so I'm like, what? It's like, danger, the ship's about to self-destruct, please evacuate. And we're going to make it harder for you to evacuate by flashing strobe lights in you every 5 seconds so you can't see what you're doing.
That is a good question, because it can't really be said that it's like that's a really good idea.
Unless it is a malfunction
in an emergency.
It's got to be some sort of power malfunction of some kind.
I know lighting systems in an emergency are a critical thing, not strobing lighting systems, but in an emergency, having lights on is always a good thing. And having those lighting systems be on an independent power source, so that, for instance, your main power source goes down in an emergency, the secondary lighting turns on and you've got, lighting. But I don't know why those lights would be strobing, BJ. You got me on that one.
Okay, here's an idea.
Like you being terribly... Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, one idea is that strobe light is part of the alarm, and the main light system is broken. And if there was a backup to help in the case of an evacuation, that one is broken. I mean, the ship is kind of getting ready to tear itself apart.
Well, my counter to that is that they had like emergency flashing lights, like the rotating lights going off, and I'm not being dumb here. I acknowledge the fact that the reason why they have the strobe lights is because they are atmospheric and they do make things creepy, but
they certainly work, I would say.
Well,
but just as
they're an excellent addition to the scene. But you're right,
BJ. I do know. Here's another one. So the strobe lights are. So I know strobe lights get used nowadays in emergency lighting situations, partially as a secondary fire alarm. I don't know if you know this. They get used as a secondary fire alarm in case there's a deaf person in a situation, right? Because the deaf person obviously can't hear a fire alarm, but they can see an annoying strobing light, and they're like, oh, shoot, that's the fire alarm. I need to get out of this now burning building.
Well, again, I argue they already have the solution in that with the rotating lights head going off, but I suppose that's true. Suppose that's about as good as we're going to get to like a good explanation outside of it looks good for the movie.
Those alarms, those little like rotating alarm lights, there might be multiple alarm systems, and there just happens when you're doing a self-destruct, like they all go off.
That could be.
So it could be that there's different alarms for different things, and it just so happens that like the major alarm is the big strobing one, and the lower level alarm is the one that goes in circles, like the blue, whatever it is. I forget what color it is.
All right.
Like anyway.
So, BJ,
yes.
Something positive on the other hand, you were talking about atmosphere. How did the music work for you?
Well, to be fair, I didn't really notice the music very much outside of when they were like approaching the alien in the big ship, but I had heard part of the soundtrack before think like way back in the day when I used to play the first Alien versus Predator game on PC. The second disc was just a soundtrack, so I would listen to that every so often. And it is very atmospheric. It is not like a lot of it isn't really like music. I would say it's not like big sweeping soundtrack for the vast majority of the movie, but it's very atmospheric. It sets the tone. Is it Jerry Goldman? I don't have my cheat sheet pulled up, so let me go check that while Gary talks about. Well, Gary talks about.
Yeah,
since he brought it up.
So the movie, I think that's a key element of a good soundtrack. Like, okay, so a really awesome soundtrack you'll notice because it's awesome, right? But a good soundtrack, one that's solid, you won't notice. It'll fade into the background and not be obtrusive while the visual is telling the story, right? It'll merely accentuate and make things better, make a better story alongside the thing. And I think this one is one of those cases. Let me see if I've got did it win any awards? Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. Let me see if any dramatic presentation, supporting actress. Oh, BAFTA Award for Best Sound. Yes.
So while Gary's looking that up, I will say Jeff was right. It was Jerry Goldsmith.
Yes. So
who also did Star Trek as well. Jerry Goldsmith did a lot of the really famous Star Trek. Not all of it, but he did a lot of it. Yeah, so he was quite big during the late 70s and 80s, and more than that too.
Yeah, it was a very good it's a very good soundtrack. It, one of those timeless kind of, like, if you hear this soundtrack, if you heard this soundtrack in a modern movie, you'd be like, yeah, that's perfectly acceptable soundtrack for setting up a scary space scenario, because it's very ethereal and yet also haunting at the same time. Ethereal and haunt. Yes, I'm using big words now.
Now, let me ask a question. Did the storyline of this movie make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Like everything, yes. And was there no quirks or anything?
Well, by and large, the only real quirk I can think of is something that just is kind of a pet peeve of mine in a lot of sci-fi horror movies, and I think me and Gary might have talked about this a long time ago, but just a concept that, every random deadly alien creature is going to be scooped up by the military for some sort of weapons project is, if you think about it, doesn't make a lot of sense, because by and large militaries already have a way of killing a lot of people without having to worry about having to go through and kill all the zombies and or aliens after to take the territory.
That is certainly true, BJ. So
the one thing, it was interesting how the character of Ripley, she kind of got to that conclusion rather quickly. She basically says, yeah, probably for their bioweapons division. And it was a guess, and it was a guess that was later confirmed by the
Ash
android. Yeah, by Ash.
And to be entirely fair, it's not like super relevant to this story, so I'm okay that they didn't like dwell on it for a long time.
Well, BJ,
there's quite a theme in like bad corporations who are greedy, who are taking advantage of people. That's a big theme in these movies, and all of them really.
One thing I can forgive them in this particular case for is the fact that military research is such a broad umbrella. Things get researched for the military. For instance, like Velcro and zippers and a whole bunch of other stuff got researched for quote-unquote space program. And yet all of these things, while used in the space industry, are also used in so many other categories, right? So I could imagine, aliens being picked up for quote-unquote military research is one thing. Like, are they going to use these things in an actual military setting? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Maybe they're actually going to be used as a, they're going to be grown in a controlled setting and then harvested for their hyperacidic blood. That's useful. I could imagine several industrial and or even military. I don't know. Acid thrower is is kind of a weird weapon that they don't use. But I could imagine it being used in under very controlled circumstances in industrial settings, an acid that can eat through practically anything. Yeah, you release that in a controlled stream, and you've got yourself a very good cutting implement, right? And
well, if this, yeah,
for the cost of this thing, these things grow, right? This thing grows, and as far as I can tell, it was eating either garbage or just normal food that the people were eating until it ate the person, right? So yeah, it's relatively cheap production of highly acidic material. I could imagine several applications of this particular product, right?
Well, and sometimes you don't always know what you're going to learn from something. So that's kind of part of the research and development. They want it because it's so unique and there's nothing like it. That's enough for them to just go mad trying to get it.
Either that or they see it as a threat and they want to figure out ways to kill it more efficiently. That could be another concept of research, but that's...
Oh, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on when Ash got the special order. Like, did he get it before they knew what the alien was, or if that was why they got pulled out of hyperspace because they had an idea what it was going to be?
I think they were pulled out of hyperspace. They sort of implied
that the whole thing was planned.
Oh, I guess
the whole thing would have had been planned, really, because you'd had to plant that guy Ash on the spacecraft ahead of time.
Yeah,
they knew this whole thing from the start.
They said like just a few weeks before the mission started, Ash got rotated. Now,
yeah,
why?
So I guess
maybe that was just the ship that was going in the right direction, and they wanted to they thought it would probably be a lot easier to acquire one of these, a sample, and bring it back than it actually was. And then best laid plans go out the window.
Yeah, so somehow they found out about this thing.
Yeah.
Well, they
knew that this ship was going its way or something.
Well, I would assume that they knew about the signal already and knew that the source probably wasn't human. And so they kind of probably charted the Nostromo to go out about that way. And like Gary said, they mentioned at some point that the science officer that usually worked on the Nostromo got rotated out for Ash at kind of the last minute.
Yeah. Now,
which is a way to make sure the mission went according to how the company wanted it to go.
Yep.
That he would be there to almost manipulate the crew into making sure that a specimen could be captured for their voyage back.
And credit where credit's due, Ian Holm, always a really good actor in just about everything he's done. Well, not everything, but in multiple cases, he's done a really good job of acting. In this particular case, he did a very good job of being kind of like a subtle, kind of scheming person behind the scenes. You can see it throughout the movie, just the little things that he did to guide things in a particular direction. A few keywords here, a glance there. He's making things happen in the way that he wants to have them happen. And you don't quite realize it on the first watch through, but like the second or third, you're like, oh gosh, this guy is making everything going according to his plan up until Ripley realizes what's going on. And
yeah, while we're on that subject, interestingly enough, when I was watching the making of Jaws, they actually mentioned Alien and about how Alien has this reputation of being this uber-violent movie, but according to the Jaws documentary, really the only scene with law blood is the chestburster scene, and while that's technically true, the scene where they attack Ash, that seems kind of dang disturbing, dude.
Yeah, it's
I
not
love that
blood.
scene,
it's like
but
this
yeah,
white
it is
milky
disturbing
stuff, but it's basically the same. If you exchange white for red, you would have the like one of the goriest scenes ever filmed in a mainstream movie.
It is very technically not a bloody scene, so whoever said that in the Jaws making of was right, but holy crap.
Oh yes.
You know what's interesting? I love that scene where he goes berserk. It's almost like he comes into some sort of great conflict within his programming, where he's following orders on this mission, but now he's hurting humans. And I almost think that maybe that is what actually started the glitch.
Actually,
well,
Jeff, have you ever been...
This is me supposing, of course, but
I've worked in a lot of fields, and one of the fields I've worked in, I've dealt with automated machinery, right? And if you've ever seen an automated machine glitch out, and you've watched this movie, you're like, oh gosh, yep, that's exactly what's happening. Something, and it could be that what you're saying, there's like a conflict of priorities,
some sort of
or it could just be that he got hit, because at multiple times before that he gets hit, right? And then
I was gonna say they like smash him with I think it's like a fire extinguisher or something a few times before he goes crazy.
Yeah, his mind is, he's pretty set right before that, and then they hit him, and then he starts freaking out, and part of that could just be it's very sensitive electronics inside of his body are getting smashed, and his body doesn't know how to process that particular damage, right?
Are you sure? I don't remember it that way. I remember him grabbing Ripley, throwing her across the room, because she is now going too far where she's interfering with his mission.
He grabs Ripley, he throws her across the room, and then he starts to try to choke her out with the magazine, and then is it Parker and Lambert come back?
Yeah,
and
Parker and Lambert come back, and they smash him.
And they smash him with fire. They smash him with
that's
a fire extinguisher.
That's what I mean. I think the moment that he actually started to break was before then. When he started throwing her, when he started physically assaulting her, I think that's when something snapped inside of him, and he started to malfunction. And because him rolling up the magazine and trying to stuff it into her mouth, I mean, that's weird. You wouldn't choke a person that way. I almost think like his programming was really messed up, and the data coming out of his brain was just screwed up at that point.
You do have a point there, Jeff, where he's acting irrationally for even a person, much less a computer. Like, he's got more efficient, like, for instance, when Parker, I believe is his name, when Parker starts trying to interfere with him, he just grabs Parker and almost rips his chest off, just showing him how strong he is.
He tries to pull the Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom on the guy.
Yeah, and you could see like the bloody handprints on his chest afterwards. It's like basically he almost rips the guy's chest off. It's like if he wanted to, he could probably dismember Ripley right then and there, but instead, you're right. He's like trying to shove a magazine in her mouth, which is weird.
So I think he broke earlier than that.
My only argument against that is that, they established that his orders are that the crew is expendable, so that shouldn't interfere with his programming. And they also don't give any indication of like there being a equivalent of like the 3 laws of robotics or whatever, right? Like
they do mention it in BJ. They do mention it in later movies, but not in this one. They specifically mention in later movies that kind of programming is put in place, but they kind of put in that it's like, okay, maybe this programming was put in place because of earlier robots. Because I
think if you had automation and there were people that were machines, you would want to put something in them that would prohibit them from doing harm to humans. Though I just think it's interesting, the moment he does harm a human, that's when he goes crazy. Oh. That's when his programming gets very irrational. That's when his decision-making starts being very erratic. And so I almost think that, and this is just me supposing, that maybe that's the reason why at that moment he became where he's almost started to self-destruct in a way, and they had to fight him. But at that point, he was just he was a crazy robot. He wasn't acting rationally.
Well,
they do mention in Aliens that model had problems. There's a line in
again,
the next movie about it. Yeah,
that might just be company.
As far as the context of this movie goes, there's no supposition of like the 3 laws of robotics, and I guess we should probably go over the 3 laws just for people who don't know what we're talking about.
So first law is robots.
This is from a different sci-fi. Let's just establish that. Jeff, this is called I, Robot, completely different thing.
Jeff, Jeff, 3 laws of robotics established by Isaac Asimov has been accepted by most other people in fiction as being kind of the basis for peaceful interactions between humans and robots, right? Where the robot's initially programmed to where it cannot harm a human or allow a human to come to harm. That's law number 1, right? And that supersedes any other programming. Law number 2 is it cannot... Oh no, it must follow a person's order, but that order cannot supersede law 1. Like a person can't order a robot to hurt a person, right? But it can order it to go, for instance, it can order the robot to go into a self-destructive position, right? It could order it to go into jump into a wood chipper, and the robot has to follow that order because it is not going to harm another person, or it's not going to harm a person. Right? It needs to follow that order. The third law is the robot must protect itself because it's valuable. But it cannot protect itself while at the cost of either a person or an order that a person has given it.
So I find it
and
funny
all of those have a weakness, and that is that the robot has to be aware of what reality is in order for those laws to work in the first place.
So that's where the concept of artificial intelligence being an important thing comes into play. But it also, the fallacy of the 3 laws of robotics is the inevitability of what's called the 0th law, as suspected in Isaac Asimov and other people, where the robots come to the conclusion that humans inevitably harm themselves, so robots need to gain supremacy over humans to protect the humans from themselves.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I always found it amusing that people still put stock in the 3 laws when, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the whole point of iRobot is that the robots do exactly that? It's been a long time since I've read iRobot.
No, the first book in the Isaac Asimov series, in the robot series of Isaac Asimov, he actually doesn't talk about the 0th law. He just talks about, it's just an exploration of human progress and as robots are accompanying them. The other books in the series talk about the further interactions between robots, most specifically one robot and one person, because it's much more dramatic. It's a robot that is being seconded to a police force and the police detective who is working with him, and how they interact with each other, because that's a lot more dramatic than just a think piece about various and assorted human and robot interactions. But eventually in that series, they do come around to the concept of robots eventually have to take over the control of humanity to stop humanity from killing itself, which we would then lose our personal freedoms to welcome in our new robot overlords who are going to be in charge of us.
Should try Asimov again at some point. I tried reading some of the stuff when I was younger. I think I tried to read Foundation, just can get into it. I need to try that again sometime.
But if you had an artificial intelligence and you wanted it to be safe and you wanted it to follow these robot laws in theory, you would have to have something like a robot subconscious mind. where there was a program doing some sort of checks against the conclusions the robot was making. Every time the robot would say, I want to do this, it would then go into that processor, calculate something, and be like, yeah, okay, humans are safe if you do that. Keep going.
Well,
and if it ever violated, that processor would have to do something to stop the program, shut it down, or go berserk or something. I don't know. Which is why Ash, I think, starts to go crazy, because his systems are like self-destructing the moment he tries to hurt a human.
Well, it also
like depends on like the sci-fi setting, because like in Halo, they have a bunch of AIs, but all the AIs are like programmed to self-terminate after X amount of years to keep them from going rampant, is what they call it in Halo. So I guess in Halo they figure it takes X amount of years for AI to get to that point, so they just build in the self-destruct fail-safe to wipe out the AI before it hits that point.
Before it gathers too much data and figures out too much.
Yeah.
but
Something like that.
But Jeff, also you do have to remember, so at the same time as the robot is going crazy, there's also a lot of other things. So I don't know if we can safely say that the robot is going crazy because of the decisions that it is being forced to make, or if because Ripley is mistreating him at that, like she throws the first punch, right? She pushes him against a wall and knocks him around, and it shows him quote unquote bleeding before he even lays a finger on her. So
I guess you're right.
It could be that she damaged him first, and then it's just kind of like a cascade effect of that, or it could be what you're saying, where there's like it's one of those things. It's very clever writing on the scriptwriter's part. Like hats off to these ambiguous people. They wrote an amazing script to where we're debating the nuances of it so many years later. But there's that, right? So we don't know. I cannot myself and I cannot conclusively say one way or another which one it is. Did she throw the first punch, or did he just go crazy and decide to kill everybody and whatever?
Yeah. Well, if we're ready to move on, I did want to talk about Ripley, the character, who is what's really fascinates me is that it's almost like she's not the main character in the beginning. I watch these movies now knowing she's the main character, but if you didn't know this story at all and you started off this movie, and the other characters get lots of screen time.
Yes.
So it's almost easier to just have her in your mind as just another member of the crew. But then she turns out to be different.
And at the time, a lot of the others, like she was a little bit lesser known versus some of the other characters that are on there. I mean, Ian Holm and John.
The captain
Hurt,
was very famous. Yeah.
Ian Holm and John Hurt are both very famous. Tom Skerritt as well. He was the guy who played Dallas. Like those guys. Yeah. Those three like supremely like talented actors at the time, and very well known. And so to say that the person in the main character of this movie is not one of those three, right, is kind of out there.
It is out there.
Well, for like the majority of the movie, I guess you could argue that Dallas is most positioned to be the main character, up until he does the main character thing and he goes down into the air vents to hunt the alien, and then he gets caught.
But even before then, you can kind of see him in, like, he does take the lead on a few things, but by the time he hits, by the time he goes out to do the exploration of the alien ship, which I want to do a huge section on the alien ship, by the way.
Okay.
That's the next thing I want to talk about is the alien ship. But when he leaves the airlock to go to the alien ship and then comes back, you can kind of see him move from even a little bit of, he was starting out as kind of an active role as being the captain of the ship, into becoming a passive role where he's taking orders from other people. Like he does a lot of taking orders from Ash. when he hits the airlock, he has to take orders from Ripley because she's on the moral high ground on a lot of things. She's like all the by the book, and he's just there to collect a paycheck. There's a whole bunch of other things that are happening.
I wouldn't say that much about him, but yeah.
So, yeah, one thing I did notice, and I'm gonna commit the cardinal sin we haven't committed in a while. I'm gonna compare this to D&D.
Okay.
So I think, at least in the earlier parts of the movie, Ripley is a good example of like a lawful character. She's by the book, but she's not dumb about it. Like, she has a very good point about not letting the away team back on the ship because there's a freaking alien attached to one of the guys. We don't know what it's going to bring in.
He needs to be in quarantine for 24 hours just to establish that whatever's happening is not going to harm the rest of the crew. But
and like the blue collar guys are giving them a hard time. Hey, why don't we get full shares like you? And she's like, you guys are required by law to get your share. Don't worry about it. They're like, what? And she's like, whatever.
Oh yeah, the interactions she has is very believable from a boss versus blue collar kind of perspective. I've seen that particular conversation play itself out so many times over my career, over my many work locations. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
She's almost like the safety marshal of the ship. She is. You get this actually in all three of the movies, or the fourth one I would say doesn't count for the real Ripley character, but all three of these movies, she is always a cautious, safety-minded person.
Well, after the first two, I can't imagine why she would be in the third.
But even in the very beginning, she's almost like she's more cautious than everyone else. She's looking for danger. She wants the crew to be safe. She wants to follow procedures. Other people are much more cavalier about safety than her. And it makes her kind of the odd person in the group because she's the one who says, no, this is wrong. We have to play this safe. We have to think about safety. And everyone else disagrees and they move on. Which is unique because if they had followed her advice, their problems possibly wouldn't have even happened. Possibly.
It would have taken less than 24 hours for the alien to give birth if the people had been stuck in the airlock or in the area immediately next to the ship. The alien wouldn't have gotten onto the ship and they would have been safe. The rest of the crew would have been safe. That is certainly true.
Which is exactly why, as we talked before, Ash lets them in, despite the fact that he's the science officer, so he should be the one enforcing the quarantine.
Yes. But, so yeah, she's, like you said, BJ, she's a lawful, good character. Lawful character. I don't know about good, but...
Yeah, I was thinking like, maybe lawful, like neutral or something. I don't know.
Could be
lawful. That's neither here nor there.
But anyways, so she's a lawful neutral character, and she's very... she kind of develops this into this as other people fall by the wayside. She becomes the person who's left in charge of things, right? At first, Dallas has to kind of be in charge, and he's like, okay, let's hunt it down. Let's get it out of our ship. And then I think Veronica Lambert, I think she's also an officer. So I think she's like second in command.
I don't think they really say. I think because Ripley's the third officer, right?
Yes.
I think it might have been Dallas and Kane who were above her.
Yeah. But
it's hard to say.
But regardless, so Dallas is captain, someone else is second. We'll have to go back and watch it at some point to figure out who's the second officer. And then Ripley's
I think it must be Kane because Lambert is still, because Lambert's one of the last three, and even though she's there, it's Ripley taking charge, so it must be Kane.
Though you could very much say make the argument that Lambert, by the time Dallas is gone, Lambert is also bye-bye. least when it comes to, at least being an effective member of the crew, you can tell she's like not willing to do anything at that point other than follow orders, because she's kind of just freaking out about anything and everything, justifiably so. You've got this freaky alien wandering around the ship, and this is something that is so very much outside of her wheelhouse. But so Ripley is the one in charge, and she's kind of she becomes the one in charge, and she's the one who has to take responsibility for what's left of the crew. And as soon as Ash goes haywire and they decide to and they like hook him back up and ask him a few questions, they say, okay, that's it, ship's gone, we're not even going to bother trying to save ourselves, we're going to take our chances on that shuttle and get the heck out of here.
So just one more thing I want to point out before we get to the alien spaceship, like Gary said he wanted to. So again, so this is just something that occurred to me when I was watching the end. So both Alien and Aliens sort of end up in a scene where Ripley suits up, but in Alien, when she's just trying to protect herself, she tries to sneak into the spacesuit and sort of avoid the aliens so she could vent it out and not confront directly. Wherein, of course, in Aliens, when she shoots up, she's not just trying to protect herself, she's trying to protect Newt. She gets in the power loader, which is and confronts the alien head on. So, which is
probably one of the most iconic scenes, at least for myself, in cinematic history. It's
like I said. Go ahead.
That particular scene. I know we're going to do Aliens itself, so I'm going to save any particular thing about it. But let's just to blow by blow, we're probably going to go at it ad nauseum in a happy way, because that is just the happy making for everybody. You're seeing giant robot versus giant monster. That's probably, in my opinion, that's the one way that you make any movie better, is giant robot versus giant monster, right?
Well, and they do a good job building up to it and then having it as a payoff.
But that's
because you go through all that stuff and you introduce the loader at an earlier time. It's a good payoff at the end.
But we'll talk
Everything
about that
is set
when we
up
talk
for that
about
scene.
that movie, right? But meanwhile, we've got, in this particular movie, like BJ's saying, she's scared and she's not confronting it. She's putting on a spacesuit specifically so she doesn't have to confront it, right?
Yeah, and I've heard people say there's sort of a undercurrent of sort of the alien and like the alien xenomorph, whatever you want to call it, life cycle being sort of the dark evil side of like the human version of reproduction. So like it flips that on its head in the next movie, where because Ripley has basically adopted Newt at this point, it's the good motherhood, for lack of a better term, going up against the twisted version of the same thing.
Yes. And that's, I mean, it's an interesting concept, and when you look at xenomorph, I do believe that is the official term. Is it not xenomorph?
I think so. That's what they refer to him as in like a lot of the comics and books and such.
When you look at xenomorph physiology, it's very interesting in its own way. I know it's all based off of the artwork by Geiger, I believe his name is.
Yeah, H.R. Geiger.
H.R. Geiger, and that artwork has been copied and done. So, fun fact, while I was watching this movie, I was building models, Tyranid models for Warhammer 40k, which are, yes, a direct ripoff of this one.
Well, that's okay.
Specifically one of the new ones, and I was
instead
building
of
the
ripoff,
spot,
we'll
like,
say
looking at the
inspired
xenomorph,
by.
and I'm like, yep, this is a direct ripoff of xenomorph.
If something's a good idea, steal it.
Yeah, it is a good idea. It does, and if you change it enough, if you're adding in different influences from multiple areas, it's not called piracy or what's the other word?
Plagiarism?
Plagiarism. It's not called plagiarism. It's called synthesis, right? If you take from multiple sources, it's called synthesis, and that's perfectly fine. That's not, it's the difference between, I learned this when I was, in my brief stint in college. If you pull from one source, it's plagiarism. If you pull from like 10 sources, it's called synthesis, and that's perfectly fine.
Jeff, you going to say something?
No.
You're just laughing. No,
everything's good.
Legitimately, it's a legitimate form of it's a legitimate form of.
I know. If you steal from enough people at the same time, it's creative.
It's called it's a creativity. It's a form of creativity. Yep, because you're taking from.
It is, and I actually
sources.
agree because I've heard this before. Like Shakespeare enjoyed mixing opposites, so he would get, not only would he combine different things as part of his creativity, but he liked combining opposite things together, things that don't seem to belong, but when you put them together in an interesting way, they provide contrast with each other. And you almost get like all these alien movies have a theme of motherhood in them to some extent, because Ripley tries to save the cat, so she's saving an innocent creature, which is, saving a small innocent creature is kind of a little bit like, what word am I? It's like nurturing in a sense. And then the second one, not only is she saving Newt, but it's like the alien wants to produce her offspring. It's her offspring against Ripley and the people that she cares about. It's like two moms fighting almost, in a way. So that, and then it goes on to the next movie in 3, which you guys say doesn't exist, but it goes on like that, where she continues to try to protect people. That one is different. Well, we don't have to talk about that one.
There's a argument to be made. I don't know if you want to dip our toe into this particular online conversation, but there's an argument to be made that a good female character, when there's a lot of people now, there's never been these strong female characters until now, when every female character has to be a girl boss or whatever, and a lot of people point to Ripley as an example of a strong female character, because it is a female characteristic to be nurturing and to have a strong protective instinct over your loved ones, your young or whatever. So
yeah, and Ripley, it fits into her whole character because she talks about safety. She's always saying, well, we can't take off until we have all these things done. Are you sure that that's safe? Are you sure that that's safe? Everything is about safety and protection, which is part of a strong matriarch, is that she's protecting the young, innocent people around her.
And no one ever has a good answer for why Ripley would not be a really strong female character, because she really is. She's got very, very, she has a very take charge kind of attitude, even in the beginning portions where she's kind of secondary to everything. You understand that she is an officer on this ship. She's making, and it's not just she's throwing her weight around. She's trying to coordinate the actions of multiple people. She's going down and visiting the work crews. She's coordinating with the other officers and whatnot. She's making sure.
Isn't she like an executive officer?
She's the third officer.
She's a third officer, but I think that she's like chief executive officer, something like that.
It does feel like that, right?
I think they've been.
Where she's
like,
in
her
Kane, if he's the second officer, seems a lot more interested in when the opportunity. He doesn't really seem to be doing much. And then he just wants to go out there and explore, which is, satisfy his own curiosity. And Dallas is very much along the same time. And while they are off doing that, that's when Ripley is looking towards the ship and making sure it's ready to take off again.
I guess it is kind of, if Kane is the second officer, it's kind of funny that they they pull a Star Trek and send the entire command staff out on dangerous away missions.
Yeah. So
there's a theme though in Alien and Aliens where the reason why they go get themselves in trouble in the first place is because they're looking for reward. So Kane is out there. If they find something, they may be able to get salvage commissions from it. Or something like that. And they mentioned that in other conversations. It's like, if we find anything, do we get a share? Yeah, you get a full share. You're under contract.
So
they're after some sort of grand payout. And that's what just causes both the first and second movies to be like that. Because it repeats again, where a family tries to go out and salvage something valuable. So greed is part of the theme of this movie.
So Jeff, should we now talk about where they're going? Is this the great time?
This is the great time. Go ahead.
The alien ship. So much is being talked about. This is one of the biggest conversations when it comes to this movie. Everybody goes, there's entire schemes. Lots of people have talked about a lot of times about the brief moments that we spend on this ship and how much storytelling went into this alien ship, right? Just the set design itself is so well put together to where every little square inch that we do see of this thing has told a story, and they did it so very well, in my opinion.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. First you see the ship from far off as they approach it, and I love how they show it through the crackle of their video monitors. Like they're getting only pieces through the transmission of what it looks like, and it builds mystery. Mm-hmm. And then finally you're able to see it, and it's this strange, large, strange shape.
And then they get into the ship, and then they start to see some of the different things inside of it, and they see, I can't remember what he's called as the engineer. There's an official name for him, like the thing that's sitting.
The name I've heard most often is the space jockey.
Oh, the space jockey. You're right. The space jockey.
Space jockey?
Yeah, he's the thing sitting.
The guy. Okay.
He's the thing sitting in the suit. Right
he's
next
kind of
to
like a pilot.
Large piece of equipment. I don't know what the piece of equipment's supposed to do. But
I think the engineers come up in like the newer alien ones, like was it Prometheus and
Prometheus
and Covenant. I haven't seen those at all. So
yeah,
I've seen Prometheus. I don't know if we want to spoil that one too, but there's a lot of things in Prometheus they made to tie in to this movie and this spaceship.
I think Prometheus falls under the sad category of trying to give an answer to a question that people. It's not that nobody has asked the question. It's like, how did things get like this alien ship? How did it get the way it is? You can't
sometimes
say
the mystery is better than the answer.
Yes. So sometimes the mystery is better than the answer. And sometimes you don't need to answer questions because people just get to make up their own story. Right.
So I saw Prometheus and I thought it was generally a good movie. There's a few things that I don't see as much making sense, but there's a lot of things they try to fix or add to with the backstory to Aliens. And that Prometheus takes place before this movie, before Alien.
And that's a problem because they try to answer questions and people wanted those questions answered, but they really quietly in the back of their mind didn't want those questions answered.
They wanted the mystery.
They wanted the mystery. For instance, let me tell you a quick side thing. This ties into it. There's a comic strip. I don't know if you guys heard about it. It's called Calvin and Hobbes. You guys heard of this one?
Yeah.
Calvin and Hobbes, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is a few things. I think there's two things that the author of Calvin and Hobbes has said that he will never explain. People have asked him about it. He makes reference to it in the comic strip, but he says he will never explain them. Right? And he does this specifically to allow the reader, because whatever he says will be less interesting than whatever exists in the minds of the readers themselves, right? Those two incidents are, I think, the spaghetti incident. Maybe I'm getting it wrong, but it's like the spaghetti incident, and then the other one is Huey Bluey and the Gooey Kablooey, which is a story that Calvin really likes to read, right? So characters make reference to those two things, and even a few small details about it might slip through, but no full explanation will ever come through. So that's kind of where we're at with this alien ship, where there's references to this alien ship, and we might see details and try to put together all of the pieces, but it would be best if we never get the full answer, because whatever we make up in our mind is probably going to be 10 times better than when they try to answer it themselves.
Yeah, I get the point. Yeah.
But
so the ship is really good, and yeah, the mystery behind the ship, I get that. And I almost feel like one of the things is when they were lowering him down into this other chamber that had moisture in it, which means moisture meaning it's trying to keep some organic thing probably in a good stasis, or in an environment where it can survive. And then he like breaks a barrier. There's a barrier where he reaches his hand through, and there's almost like a misty barrier. And I almost think like that might be some sort of safety mechanism.
And
like they don't want germs or microbes or anything to grow outside of that, and he just reaches his spaceman hands right through that, not knowing what he's getting into.
And it speaks to the fact that this isn't a complete derelict either, right? Obviously, there was the signal that was already being put on broadcast, but there's also the fact that there's a system still functioning on this ship. Whether or not they're functioning properly is one thing, but there's systems on the ship that are still functioning, that barrier being one of them, right? Which I think leads into the concept of they're, like you said, they're looking for a payday. You can see them they keep going further and further in the ship, trying to find something to take back to their own ship. They're trying to find something small and valuable that they can take back and sell to their company for a huge amount of money, so they'll all be rich by the end of all of this, right?
Well, I don't know if all of them are that way. I think it seems like Kane is there for like the actual pursuit of knowledge or whatnot.
Yeah,
because he like volunteers to go right away, and like the blue collar guys are only going along because there's a clause in their contract saying that they are obligated to investigate signals like this. That if they don't, they lose all their pay. So
yeah,
I think everyone has a what's the word? A different motive.
Yeah.
Like, I think Kane is there for like the actual pure knowledge, but I suppose that's neither here nor there. So carry on.
But it's still they go in there and it's the classic problem. If this was Lord of the Rings, right? The problem of the dwarves dug too deep, right?
Yeah.
For instance, if they had stopped where the space jockey was, taken some pictures, right? If they'd stopped, taken some pictures, maybe broken off a chunk of the space jockey's suit and walked right back to their ship, they could have that would have been more than enough to fulfill their contract, right? They've gotten good pictures of the ship.
Take some samples back.
Some samples, and they've left. Right? They're not a science crew. They're in no way, shape, or form a science crew.
They were not qualified at all for this kind of thing that they were doing.
If they just collected a few small samples, gotten some pictures, collected some samples, they would have met their contract. They could have been out of there. Everything's safe, right? Kept those samples in quarantine.
The company probably didn't want that. The company wanted it for themselves, and maybe this was just the way for them to get it. They could be like, oh, look, one of our spaceships accidentally discovered this thing. I guess it's ours. I guess other people, other agencies, science agencies can't lay a claim on it because of that or something.
It could be argued that maybe then Ash wouldn't have let the ship take off until someone had been infected or they'd brought back a live sample, but
But did they even know that?
I was going to say, that goes back to the conversation we had earlier about whether or not the company knew what was there or just knew there was like an alien signal. So
yeah,
that's something we don't know the answer to, I don't think, unless they talk about it in
Prometheus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That or Covenant.
I won't give up. Yeah. I won't give up too much plot. And I actually don't remember Prometheus enough to really comment about it because it's been so long ago. But I think there's a lot of things they put in there.
In this particular case, I think they went too far. I think that was a personal motivation, though. Like, they didn't need to. They probably would have fulfilled, at least from their point of view, if they just gone to this site, taken some pictures, maybe collected a few small samples, they would have fulfilled any and all obligations. But it speaks to a motive of personal personal motivation where they are pushing further than they really need to go to investigate further than they're really qualified to investigate, right? Because
well, you get the sense that I don't know if they ever come out and say it, and I don't think they do, but you get the sense that they have found life on other worlds, but they just haven't found any kind of life that they're really, really interested in.
Yeah,
I think
it's almost like maybe they only found microbial life or something, and this is like the new big thing.
Oh, I think the only context clue they give to that is that when they talk about the signal and Ripley asks if it's human, and like no one gives her like hope, that's crazy talk look. So maybe they found some other life forms or maybe evidence of other life forms, but like you said, I don't think they really get into it outside of that one line of her asking if the source signal is human, then no one calls her crazy or even like or like even gives her like a sidelong glance or anything.
But it is space, right? You have to understand that you're going over all this area, so eventually you're going to run into something that you're not quite familiar with. But yeah, probably up to this point they haven't run into anything that's as near as developed as Earth is now. It's probably well established that at this point there's colonies out there. And in the further movies, they do talk about multiple colonies to the point where even some of them have particular reputations. Like, for instance, there's one colony, I can't remember what it was. Basically, it was Space Las Vegas. But
where do they mention that?
It's when the soldiers are talking in the second movie. They're going to this world, and it's like, oh, we went to that one world, and we had an awesome time there. And the guy's like, yeah, it's like, yeah. Then they go on to weird stuff that soldiers talk about all the time. But anyways, yeah. So, but it's multiple. Like, there are multiple colony worlds out there, and some of them have, maybe there might even be lost colony worlds, like colonies sent out and not and they're not where they're supposed to be, and they started to develop it. It doesn't really. It's difficult to get a scale for time. Did they say a date in this movie, BJ? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I don't think so.
Head.
No, I'm pretty sure they don't have a date in there, which is good. I think it's so much better when science fiction doesn't put a date on the movie, because yeah, it can be problematic as time goes on.
Yeah.
After all, much of Star Trek takes place in 1995, according to the original timelines.
I know from a fashion standpoint, the concept of the jumpsuit is rather timeless, especially when it comes to space travel, because it's a relatively simple piece of clothing that will stay relatively close to the body, which is very useful in a space setting. But they are wearing some rather odd artifacts. One guy's wearing a headband. I know another guy's wearing a Hawaiian T-shirt. I think Dallas wears a hat. Does he wear a hat? I know Brett wears a hat.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know Brett wears like a baseball cap. I think
Brett wears a baseball cap and a Hawaiian shirt. Does Dallas wear I know, no, he's got a
I
jacket.
don't think he
I
does.
remember.
Yeah.
No, I don't
Where's
think he
the
has
jacket?
a hat. No.
Oh, doesn't
He
have
wears
that.
yeah. Some of them are more in uniform, and some of them are not. And part of it is that two of the guys are really not so much part of the crew, but they're like contracted. So they probably have different rules
No,
for them.
I think they're all part of the crew. They just all sign different contracts depending on what their particular specialty is.
It's like some of them are employed by the company, and some of them are just contract. Is what I really was trying to say. Yeah.
Anyways, so they go onto the ship. They dig too deep, and they bring back things that they're not supposed to bring back. And that's kind of the impetus of this movie. And it is. I get back to this concept that I talked about on a different podcast, where a lot of the movies previously, in previous eras, a person's not hurt until they do something that causes them to quote unquote deserve it. Like, for instance, in this movie, Kane isn't infected by the alien until he goes way past. Like, there's so many warning signs for him to not be in the area where he's at, right? There's a barrier and it's telling him go away, and he intentionally breaks that barrier, right? There's the space jockey has a thing that's busted out of its chest, and he's like, this obviously they're on a crashed ship. Something has gone horribly wrong in this area, and they're not being as cautious as they should be when dealing with it, right?
Dude,
so whatever, maybe they don't deserve it, but they've definitely gone into this situation and made this situation on their own, right?
So do they establish that the alien ship has crashed? Because by and large,
I don't think they do.
Intact.
I
don't think it's crashed. There's no indication that it is.
Actually,
it's not really damaged anywhere from what I've seen.
Actually, no. In other movies, they show that, like, for instance, in this one, I don't know if they show how they get into the ship. I know in other movies they show how they get into the ship is the fact that there's large broken sections, and that's how there's like holes in the side of the ship, and they get in through those.
From what I remember, there's just some big like round openings in the side of the ship that they walk in through. I didn't look like crash damage though, from what I recall, but I could be wrong.
In the second one, it shows clear crash damage. I know that for certain, and it's supposedly the same world and same ship. So, but yeah, the Prometheus prequel, I don't know if it's talking about this particular world. It shows a ship like this one crashing, so yeah.
Well, again, I'm just trying to go by the context of this movie, because I have not seen Aliens for a while, and the other ones for even longer than that, and some of them not at all, so...
Yeah.
Anyway,
there's one thing that confuses me about this universe is that they go into hypersleep and then they travel long distances. But there's no way, even in 10 months of hypersleep, that you could get anywhere in the universe. Solar systems are just spaced apart way too far.
They probably have some sort of faster than light travel, but they still use hypersleep the same way that, because hypersleep we have something along those lines right now, where if you put a person in kind of a cold sleep, they actually have this right now. This technology, it's working. You can put a person into a medically induced coma, right? A very controlled medically induced coma, and have them sleep and then reduce their body temperature to a certain point, and that slows down their metabolism. So you can, if you have them hooked up with IVs, they don't burn calories, and then they can just kind of sleep in a like I said, a cold sleep. And they've kept people under for like 2 or so weeks, and then brought them back up with zero zero long-term consequences to their health, and they're exploring how to push that even further for the purposes of space travel because they use so much less resources while they're asleep, right? And when you go into space, every hour you spend of breathing requires X amount of pounds of oxygen. Every day you're awake requires X amount of pounds of water and food to keep you alive. And then it's like so difficult to keep a person alive, and every bit of material to keep a person alive costs money to move from ground to orbit. So, obviously.
Well, here's the thing that confuses me about space travel in general.
Yep.
Because you're traveling from one point to another.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are traveling at the speed of light, the problem is the closer you get to the speed of light, the faster time is.
Oh,
so
isn't it?
Well, this is
no, it's faster.
You're slower because like the twin paradox, right?
Yes. So the faster a person travels, the faster time is from their point of view, and the slower time is from people who are traveling slower.
But
so if this spaceship went as the speed of light from one solar system to another, then you wouldn't really have time.
This is where we get into the hand-wavy science fiction faster than light travel, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some hard sci-fi that goes into that, but that is...
Well, the other
really
sci-fis,
stuff like this.
like in Star Wars, they go into hyperspace, which it's instead of traveling through normal space, you travel through some other kind of space that you can get from one spot to the other easier through. Whatever it is, I don't know. But the point is that you're not traveling at the speed of light. Not really, because time would change so much.
Which kind of makes the hyperspace ram in Last Jedi make less sense, but we've dunked in that movie hard enough, I think.
But and I know other science fiction realms, like I was mentioning Warhammer earlier. I know Warhammer has a very unique version of faster than light travel. That's something that every science fiction group has to make an answer to, is how are you going to get from one area of space to another in a reasonable amount of time, and they always have a different hand-wavy answer to that particular problem. And maybe they do a slow ship, or maybe they do a fast ship. And if they do a fast ship, what's your methodology of moving from one spot to another? Is it like some sort of wormhole? Is it are you manipulating the laws of physics in that particular area? Is there the hyperspace, quote unquote, whatever is Star Wars and Star Trek? I don't know. I like Warhammer's unique answer to it because it's fun.
So while we're on the subject of sci-fi horror and Warhammer, I assume this is going to fly over Jeff's head, so Jeff, I apologize. But Gary, I assume you've heard the fan theory of, what's it called, Event Horizon being the prequel to Warhammer. It's like the first time the ship enters the warp or whatever.
And that actually has been all but confirmed by Games Workshop, that they're basically saying, because obviously they don't own
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
They don't own Event Horizon, so they can't obviously say that is the case, but they have said that's a very interesting theory you've got there whenever people bring that one up in conversations.
Have you seen Event Horizon, Jeff?
Is that a movie?
Yes. Like a 1990 something. Michael Fishburne and Sam Neill?
Yeah.
No, I'm drawing a blank.
Okay.
I might have seen it. Who knows?
Because how they answer...
My brain deletes a lot of data. A lot.
Do we want to spoil it, or do you think Event Horizon might be something that we talk about at some point?
I honestly don't know. if we're gonna talk about Event Horizon, it's just a fun way of.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem like something we would really talk about.
No, it goes a little too excessive.
This relates to space travel, right?
Yeah,
we're talking about space travel.
Yeah, so I guess we're gonna spoil Event Horizon for everybody.
And I'll let you do this one, BJ.
Okay, so Event Horizon, the plot of Event Horizon is that is it a salvage ship?
No, the ship the ship that they are on is a salvage ship because they're trying to pick up a
Yeah, so basically what happens is that a salvage ship goes out and they find the hulk of a ship that was like one of the first attempts of faster than light travel. And it seems to be abandoned.
It's an alien ship.
No.
Right?
No.
It's a human ship. Made ship.
Yeah.
Right.
So they go on it, and the ship seems to be abandoned. But once they get on, they keep having like these horrific visions that are made real or something like that. And it turns out that the ship, when it so it's kind of like hyperspace. They travel into a subdimension or sort of a different dimension to create the effect of faster than light. But unlike Star Wars, where it's just like blue swirling lights, the dimension they travel through in Event Horizon is, well, they pretty much say it's hell. So it's not a nice place.
Just like, we found a shortcut, everyone.
We found a shortcut, but it's in a really rough neighborhood. The only
bad news to it, it's in a rough neighborhood.
Go ahead, Gary.
And here's the thing, though, Jeff, is it works. It has disastrous consequences.
So long as you have good shadow makeup,
it's got disastrous consequences, but it is true faster than light travel. So in Warhammer 40K, they take this particular idea. This is where you get into the concept. I
think Warhammer is older than Event Horizon, so.
It is, but I don't think they had explained warp travel yet.
Yeah.
So they might have been like, "Ooh, this is how we can explain our warp travel." But anyway, so in Warhammer 40K, this is where I get into the concept of if you steal from multiple sources, if you're like stealing from one source, it's plagiarism. But if you steal from 10 sources, it's called synthesis, and that's completely fine. So Warhammer steals from so many other different sources, so I'm pretty sure they stole this one from these guys. But the idea is then that this works, right? So you can travel faster than light. It just has dire consequences every time you do, right?
So in Warhammer, they basically use the same thing, except they have a special energy field that keeps the hell dimension from influencing them.
Most of the time.
Unless it breaks, then bad things happen.
Yes. And even when it works, it only mostly works. Like when you're traveling through the warp, don't go to sleep. And if you do go to sleep, you're going to have bad dreams. Really bad dreams. But yeah.
So there's another show that has space travel between planets. This one's from 1937. It's Flash Gordon, and the fun thing about that is that there is no science at all. It's like, we got a rocket ship, we can go to planet Mongo now.
I mean, that...
And they don't even go into the stars. They just travel from one set of clouds to another.
Well, by and large, in most let's call it soft sci-fi media, that's all you need, it's only if you want to dig into like the hard sci-fi stuff that you have to justify FTL travel or whatever. But like in most cases, like Star Trek and Star Wars, unless you're like a super nerd, you don't really need to know the science behind it.
And you don't need to know any science to just sit down and watch this movie and just love the jump scares and the intrigue and the strobe lights that are like, oh no, how do we get out? So this movie is really good at just controlling the emotions of the viewer. And I think that's a real reason why movies become real blockbusters. It really comes down to, how will it make people feel? That's the big question for entertainment.
In the case
I think
of
this
Alien,
movie hits it spot on.
In the case of Alien, it makes people feel scared.
Well, yeah, but it also leads them through all these scary things. It builds up scary moments, and then at the very end, after you get away, then it has its final scene where all of that effort to escape has been for nothing, because now here's the creature just a short distance away.
But
So it has that tense moment
I
in it,
appreciate
and
at the
yeah,
end of the movie, you can like you've been holding your breath the entire, well, not holding the entire time, but it's kind of like one of those you're so tense, but then the end of the movie everything's calm, right? She's very calmly detailing out her last report before she's going to go put herself into cryo sleep. She's the music is calm and peaceful. You know the situation is being resolved, and you're just so you have a chance to have a long exhale and relax before the movie lets you before the movie is fully over and you're done, right?
which is an important part
Yeah.
because you want to take the audience to the brink of fear, and then finally, when it's at its worst moment, everything works out, and then you have them have this cool down moment. And the movie has cool down moments throughout the movie. You don't want to have tension the entire time.
Yeah.
You want to have
Yeah.
moments where the audience can relieve tension and they can get a break and then build up to the next tension scene. And in the final end of the movies where we get our final everything is okay, but at the same time the music still kind of has that mysterious sound to it.
The
So it's
haunting
okay, but still,
the
I mean,
haunting ethereal quality to it. Yes.
yeah. So it's like everything's safe now, but still there are mysteries out there. You know, watch the
Watch
skies.
the sky. You're next. That's Major Body Snatchers, right? Here.
Well, I guess we should start wrapping things up here because I gotta go do stuff, and I'm sure you
Oh,
guys.
come
He has
on.
important things to do.
Yeah. Oh, come on. If we go for another 15 minutes, it will be as long as the movie is. But no, we will call it there.
Just far less budget.
I was gonna bring up another weird sci-fi horror movie, but we don't have time, I guess.
We could do that next one. Which have we established what the next one is, or should we leave the audience in
Um,
suspense?
Let's leave the audience in suspense because we often can't go follow through on plans.
That
We
is
have
true.
things change so much. Who knows?
Yeah. So we don't even know what we have planned in November yet.
We'll
Well, I
figure
think
it
we
out.
have one.
Yeah.
But we have to work out the details. But the second or the first one, we're still up in
Okay.
the air on. That's my fault because I need to review said movie
Okay.
for reasons.
Yeah, there was.
So
Anyhow,
let's do the final recap. Jeff, what did you think of this movie?
all right. What I would summarize, what I think of the movie is that this is the classic space crew meets an alien movie. It's like there's movies where it's like, oh, it's a boy and his dog. There's other movies where, oh, we're a group of knights searching for treasure, like, or the Holy Grail, like in King Arthur's Fable. There's all these like stereotypical movie types. This is like the most iconic of the crew meets an alien. And there's been so many things inspired by this. There's been games and other movies and so many things because people love a space monster, something mysterious, and it has all of the fears associated with a predator like a bear or a shark or something, but it's more mysterious. It comes from some unknown place and its capabilities are incredible. And I think the feeling of just that we're being hunted, it's a primordial? It's a
Primal?
part of our primal feelings that we
You were
have,
close.
where we have an instinct where we have this paranoia that something's hunting us, and this movie exploits that feeling, and it's a good wild ride and a good watch. And that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I would generally agree. I have seen people argue that they think it's a bit that's a slow movie. I would personally disagree. It's not a movie. It's a movie that's build around tension rather than jump scares, I would say. So
there are jump scares.
There are jump scares, yeah, but they are mostly all earned. There is one classic cat jump scare. It might even be like the trope namer cat jump scare. I'm not sure, but yeah. All in all, it's a good movie. It is definitely rated R unless you watch it on like TV or something. So the only last thing I have to say is that while Aliens is generally considered a less stressful, less scary, tense movie, I will say that both movies have a motion tracker. I think Aliens does the motion tracker better than Alien did. Gives it a much better effect. But either way, like I said, it was my first time watching it, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. It was a nice rewatch. So,
oh yeah, good, solid first scary movie of October for us, I guess. Well, anything else since Gary needs to go? Jeff, anything you want to throw in at the end?
Yep, that's good.
Gary, anything you want to throw in at the end?
No.
He's yawning so hard he wants to get out of here. Okay, so anyway. So thank you for listening to Wander Tangent Podcast. I'm BJ. With me was Jeff and no longer special guest star Gary. And we will see you next time.
Watch the sky.
You're next.